I will introduce this. So I requested that this be on the agenda. I think, state law is, I don't want to say clear, but the state law exists on this issue. It's somewhat clear. I think at this point, we can have Councilor Cummings give any updates that he wants to give. But I think state law is fairly clear on what has to be done. But I think beyond state law, there is our own city practices and how we fill vacancies. And so first, if we just want to, I'll turn over to Mayor Biss or Councilor Cummings, but if we first just want to lay out what the state law mandated process is, which I think is fairly straightforward. And then, a little layer deeper than that, what Mayor Biss, what your intention is within that framework for filling, particularly we have a vacancy for the 9th Ward, but I think we should begin looking at a policy for filling vacancies overall in elected office. And so, Councilor Cummings, do you just want to first briefly walk through state law? I think you can maybe do that in a minute or two.
I will try and make this as brief as possible. Good evening again, Chair Reid, members of the Rules Committee, Nicholas Cummings, Corporation Counsel. So state law is as clear as Illinois state law can be with respect to filling of vacancies. With respect to resignation, there are two different types of vacancies. There can be abandonment of office and resignation. There are two types of resignation, which is unconditional and conditional. Both of them require notice sort of in writing. And then it triggers all of the provisions in state law wherein the mayor, at least in the city of Evanston, it would be the mayor, sometimes it would be the village president or a board of trustees, but it would be that chief executive official would be charged with appointing someone to fill that vacancy. This same goes for if Clerk Mendoza, for some reason, decided to resign, the mayor would have to pick a new clerk. And then the city council, and the question came up during public comment, who are the corporate authorities? The city council would then have to confirm sort of this person that was appointed by the mayor. If that person does not receive a majority vote, the mayor has to pick again. And if that second person doesn't get a majority vote, the mayor just picks one of those two until city council can agree on who is actually qualified to fill the position. It is my assumption that the mayor would probably meet with the members of city council to see if the mayor would have the votes before appointing someone. So we probably wouldn't see the where we would have like 3 rounds of trying to confirm someone. But the mayor is the person who actually gets to pick the person who fills the seat. The mayor has to pick that person based on qualifications outlined in state law. They have to be a resident of the city for at least a year. They have to be a resident of the ward for at least a year. They can't be in debt to the city. Those are basically the 3 things. Those are very similar to what the city code requires you to be an elected alderman. I think our city code also requires you not to have a felony or something of that nature in your background. But state law only requires sort of those 3 things. And the city council has to approve that person within 30 days of the appointment. If that 30 days passes, I think the person, the mayor just has made the appointment, similar to if the city council does not approve one of the 2 people that was presented, that person would continue to serve until city council actually does sort of approve them under a state code. Because if there is a resignation that's effective at least 130 days before the next general municipal election, scheduled under general election law, and that there are at least 28 months left in a term, there will be an election for the vacancy at the next general municipal election as outlined by state law. Evanston's municipal election is not until 2025. However, state law does have a municipal election scheduled every 2 years. So there is a municipal election in 2023. So in the instant case regarding the 9th Ward, there will be an election for the 9th Ward council member in 2023 that will follow the primary schedule. I believe, hopefully we'll be back on a normal schedule for petitions and primaries. 2022 is a little off because we don't have a primary until like June or something like that. But, The petition schedule will probably start in the fall of 2022, and then we'll actually have a primary in February and election in March. So that's it when it comes to state law, or March or April.
Yes, February and April. Thank you, Council Cummings. Mayor Fisk.
Yeah, just want to highlight a couple. There's a little bit of kind of odd stuff there. So this will be the only municipal election that occurs, the only City of Evanston election that occurs in 2023. So there'll be stuff going on. There's going to be a school board election, but as you'll recall, those never trigger February primaries, whereas municipal elections do. And so if the 2023 field has enough candidates to trigger a primary, then God help us all, there's going to be a 9th Ward only February primary for that council race in 2023. Because of the primary, it means the folks running in this race, as you'll recall, have slightly different petition schedules than the school board numbers. So there's just going to be this funny election floating out there of a type we've never had before in the city of Evanston. Just two other points I want to quickly make before answering your question, Mr. Chair. First of all, Council Member Nusma raised the important question of the redistricting. We've talked about redrawing the map because a census has occurred and the wards are pretty different population. That's something that I'm really strongly supportive of doing. You can't really do that before the election, though, because if you redraw the map, then you got to hold the election in the new map, but then you're holding the 9th Ward election in a new map, but the 8 folks representing wards 1 through 8 are representing old districts, and you've got overlap and so forth. So I would request
I'm sorry, I'll let you finish and then I'll talk.
Yeah, I would request that the folks working on redistricting do it with that calendar in mind, and I would recommend that the goal be to complete and pass a map shortly after the 2023 election. So on the one hand, you don't have 2 different maps in the air during the 2023 election, which would make a weird, confusing election even more weird and confusing. But on the other hand, you do it fast enough to give as much time as possible before the 2025 election. The other point that I wanted to make, and I already see Councilmember Braithwaite's hand raised, is that it's nice if you'd ask me my opinion, Mr. Chair, but of course there's 2 real experts on this issue on our council, Council Members Braithwaite and Revelle, who've gone through this process, and so I think it might be interesting to hear from them as well. Councilmember Fleming is no longer with us because she had a previous commitment. She's having a ward meeting, as some of you know, on Saturday morning. The intent will be to publish a full process and for her to share at that ward meeting. So, these are conversations that she and I are having on an ongoing basis. But I think a few things are really critical. I think it's important that we have an open application process, that there be an application online. Anybody can fill it out. Nobody gets to be considered if they don't fill it out. And anybody who does fill it out will have a one-on-one conversation with me. I think it's useful to have a public component of the process. For instance, Councilmember Revelle has told me about a component that she went through when Mayor Tisdall appointed her. I think it's unwise to make a commitment until we see the size of the applicant pool, whether that process include every applicant or just a list of finalists, because you want to construct a process that actually helps the community get information. And the best way to do that will depend on, if there's 3 applicants, you probably want to put them all in a public process. If there's 30, you almost certainly don't. And so, the important things for me to do are devise a timeline for the application form to be published, and then to set a deadline, and then to establish the mechanism by which either all the applicants or the finalists will be a part of the opportunity for public phase of the process. And the other thing I didn't say, and I don't believe that our Corporation Council mentioned, is that Councilmember Fleming's resignation letter has now been filed, and the resignation is effective February 15th. So she will be participating in our next 2 council meetings, January 24th and the much beloved Valentine's Day meeting. Because she was so generous as to give us a nice long runway, that gives us the opportunity to do a lot of this work while she's still in office, so that we can have a process where I'm really giving folks a chance and time and listening to them carefully and thinking about the decision deeply, but also moving pretty quickly after she's gone so that the Ninth Ward residents don't have to go without representation for almost any time at all. So that's kind of, that's where I stand. And again, I think all of us would benefit from learning from Council Members Revelle and Braithwaite about their experiences that they went through and what they thought. We stand to learn from those, and that's what I know.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Biss. Councilmember Braithwaite, go ahead.
I was just going to offer the floor to Councilmember Revelle. Or if you want me to share first, it doesn't matter.
Yes, well, when the vacancy in the 7th Ward occurred, Mayor Tisdall convened, I'd say it was a fairly informal process, but she basically let it be known that she was going to be holding I guess basically like a ward meeting, and invited residents to come to the meeting to talk with her about what they were looking for in their next alderman. And at that meeting, she invited anyone present who was interested in being appointed to talk for a couple of minutes about their, why they wanted to serve and what their vision was for Evanston. And so I'd say there were at least 6, maybe 7 of us who stood up and shared a few remarks. And then I don't believe that evening she made any kind of formal decision, but then soon after that, she went to council and proposed that I fill the vacancy.
Thank you, Councilmember Revelle. Councilmember Braithwaite, are there any questions for Councilmember Revelle as a response to? Okay, if not, then Councilmember Braithwaite.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Reid and Mayor. I agree. It was a very similar process, and I do think for anyone going through it, and it doesn't matter whose ward there is that informal ward meeting. If nothing else, there were some things that I followed with my predecessor, the now Judge Lionel Jean-Baptiste, and it's a wonderful opportunity for anyone who would be appointed or is interested just to hear from the residents and be able to respond to some of those questions. So to Councilmember Reid and also to Corporation Counsel Nicholas, I think if we are making the changes in talking about it, I think it would be critical that we institutionalize, the public meeting of some sort. We don't have to hammer that out tonight, but just that there's a meeting where residents will have an opportunity to share their thoughts of what's important to them. So whomever is walking into this position, comes with somewhat of a roadmap and an understanding of what's important to the residents at that given time.
Thank you, Councilmember Braithwaite. I see Councilmember Kelly, you're unmuted. I don't know if that's because you're.
Oh, sorry. Well, I did have a question. I'm unclear. Are we obligated to have elections either way in 23 for this?
Yes.
Okay. So either way, there will be an election. Okay.
And the idea, the rule is, I think it's a good law. The law says, hey, listen, the residents need representation. So we'll have this quick mechanism where I make an appointment to fill the vacancy. But as soon as it's reasonable, you want the residents to pick their council member, not me. And so because there's a municipal election happening anyway in April of 23, have it then so the residents can have their voice heard.
Okay.
And it should be pointed out, I think I missed that when I gave my synopsis, that the person that is elected in 2023 will serve until 2025 when all of you are back up for election or the positions are up for election. So it'll only fill the remaining 2 years of the term.
The vacancy.
Yeah. And then have to run again if they choose to do so.
Mayor Biss, there's a point, and I blanked where I interrupted you, and I deservingly now forgot my question. Do you happen to remember what you were saying when I?
Yeah, I was talking about the redistricting ramifications.
I wanted to weigh in on that as well. So,
okay, first, Councilmember Newsom, go ahead.
I just wanted to clarify the mayor's statement about having maps not be released until after the 2023 election. I just want to make sure you would be comfortable or not having tentative maps be in circulation prior to that date. Or were you concerned just about a final decision being made, which it absolutely makes sense not to officially redistrict until after that election, but there may be draft maps circulating prior to the election, unless you think that's a bad idea?
I think it's fine to play it by ear. I mean, we might, depending on how things are playing out, we may want to wait until petitions are filed so you don't literally confuse a candidate, you know. But I don't come to the table, you know, here in January of 22 with a strong view on that. I'm sure we can all work through that together in a way that we'll agree on.
And I'd like to get the redistricting process done by the end of 2023.
Yeah, I agree.
So we certainly have time, but I don't want to wait forever to start it. And if we're going to get it done by the end of 23, I'd like to start it. We'll have to be working on it far enough in advance, probably prior to the election in the spring of 23. So we'll just have to be careful about communication and just make sure it's absolutely clear to the community.
Yes, the point that I was going to make is I certainly, well, one, I will just say I may disagree with the opinion that if we were to adopt a new ward map, that there would be one ward map in existence for the 9th Ward, or one ward boundary in existence for the 9th Ward and then a separate in existence for the other wards. I think it makes sense to wait until after the 2023 elections, but certainly I also would think it would make sense to have maps floating around before then, and without confusing people. I think the folks that we can educate folks, and I think our new clerk can do a good job of making sure that just one ward understands what their boundaries are and what they have to do and what they should not do, as opposed to a citywide confusion. I was going to say to Councilmember Braithwaite's point about institutionalizing this. That is the point. I think what I'm hearing here from the group is that certainly there seems not to be opposition to institutionalizing a process. One, it seems that a process that includes an open application and some kind of open form, and that the mayor can determine how those things work, are two things that there seems to be at least there doesn't seem to be any strong opposition to either of those two things. And I think those two things make sense as far as, if we're going to institutionalize something, I think those two things make sense to institutionalize. Again, that there's an open process for applying and that there is an open process for reviewing some subset or some, either all or some subset of candidates as determined by the mayor publicly. And then, of course, state law kicks in as far as what the council's duties and responsibilities are and whether or not an election would exist. Is there any further comments on this?
Councilmember Kelly had it for a while, and I have.
Oh, sorry.
So just
Okay,
so
sorry.
I know, if I at my ward meeting tomorrow, if folks ask what is the process, so that hasn't been determined yet. I just want to make sure I'm clear on what the process is. If they're asking what's the process, like can people write us?
I can't give you a document with a timeline, but I've made a commitment that there will be an open application that is available to the community. That is the way people apply, because I want to avoid, hey, let me apply by just making a phone call because I know you. So there'll be an open application process that'll be done online. It'll be visible to the whole community, and that at the latter stages there will be a public facing component to the process.
Okay, so that'll be probably in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I think even Councilmember Fleming's Saturday ward meeting, my hope is to be able to give her something with more detail, again, with dates on it, and by this date this happens, by this date this happens, by this date this happens, that she can share, just in 3 days from now.
Okay, great, thank you.
Oh, and okay, Mayor Biss.
Look, I don't have super strong feelings. I would just urge us to be cautious about what we institutionalize, because I think that expectations evolve, right? So, for instance, I don't think Mayor Tisdall did anything wrong. In fact, I think she did everything right with these and was open. but there wasn't an online web form to use to apply because that technology existed, but it wasn't sort of the way everything was done the way it is now. And so I guess if it's the will of the committee and the council to put something in the rules or the code, I don't have a strong objection to it, but I want it to be written in a flexible way so that we don't write a rule for January 2022 technology and expectations that winds up being kind of a little bit of a bad fit in just 3 or 4 years, and then we got to come back and scramble and fix it. I think the goals of transparency and public input are really critical, and if we want to institutionalize those, fine. If we want to take the position that we don't see a problem and therefore there's no need for a change, that's fine too. But let's just not be too prescriptive in a way that would hold us back.
Yeah, certainly. My recommendation is to again, I at least what I was laying out didn't include any technology component. It was just that there will be an open application process, whether that takes place on papyrus or whether it takes place in a database, and that there would be an open community forum as well. The only thing that I think makes sense to, and what I think those two particular things achieve are exactly what you said you wanted to avoid. And we're lucky to have, yourself as our mayor, someone who's committed to transparency. But, let's say we get another mayor, at whatever period, and that mayor just wants to handpick someone and doesn't want to go through a public process. I think that's the only standard, that there is an open, transparent process that we should put into, institutionalize, and then how that plays out. I was even, careful. I attempted to be careful in, you suggested that, if there are 30 people apply, that you should have flexibility to determine that, your top 3 or 4 or whatever go on to a public hearing. And I think that flexibility can be maintained, but just that there should be some public form or process and a public application. That's it. I'm sorry, let me double check for hands. I'm on a phone. I do not see any further hands. So if it is the will of this committee, I would like, after this process is done, to bring forward to a rules committee meeting. Councilmember Braithwaite will be chair at the time, but just a few rules that would set this in, set the transparency aspect of this in stone, and still allow flexibility for the mayor to lead in the way that the state code allows, but also set the expectation of Evanston residents to have a transparent, open process. Silence is consent in government. So I guess that is consent that this will come back to another agenda with those components sometime after after we've had a fresh update in the lessons of appointment,